This is NTV.
Greetings and salutations. It's yet another day where we take a look at your world. And now, speaking of which, the past year underscored, the importance of safeguarding our mental wellness. I think if there's a time everyone now understands the importance of harnessing the same is now. So even as we face the new year, would like to talk about our mental wellness, and today we'll do it a little bit different. Tukona kikao cha wazee, and this is where the men will take time to speak amongst themselves and speak about of issues that affect men and how they can also underscore the importance of harnessing their mental wellness. Well, the gentlemen are awaiting on the other side, but before we get to it, here now is what else you can expect. Well, as I mentioned, it's all about the men today and how to safeguard their mental wellness.
I feel good because I've been offline like almost a week.
Ugandans relieved after the internet was partially restored almost 5 days after a new total blackout.
We are going to get our academic life back on track.
Ghana reopened schools after a 10-month closure due to the pandemic, and we'll have all the details.
It's a little bit of reconciliation.
And Chocolatier near DC celebrates the upcoming U.S. presidential inauguration by sharing her treats. Again, thank you for joining us on this broadcast. My name is Gladys Gashanda, and as we focus on the mental wellness and special focus on the men, here's the question of the day to you. And the question is, how or why do men find it difficult or hard to talk about mental health issues? Talk to us. That hashtag is new normal. And of course, remember, you can call in or text in. Remember, Leonie Kikao Chawaze, I'll be your moderator, even as we understand deeper as to the dynamics when it comes to mental wellness with the gentleman. But before we get to it, let's take a look at some of the numbers making headlines in as far as COVID-19 is confirmed and, or rather concerned, and around the globe this morning. That number stands at 96,621,459 confirmed cases of COVID-19, 69,269,968 have totally recovered, and 65,624 have unfortunately succumbed to COVID-19 around the world. So how does it look like in Kenya? Oops, okay, I had those numbers, but remember, we are closing in on that 100,000 mark in as far as the infections in this country are concerned. We are still at the 1,700, over 1,700 mark in as far as the deaths are concerned, and we keep reiterating here on Your World, it is imperative that you do not let your guard down, social distance, wear your mask, and wash your hands with soap and water. And if you cannot get around to that, use your alcohol-based sanitizer. Well, let's take a look at some of those stories making headlines this morning, and we'll start closer home. And Ugandans relieved after country eases internet shutdown, and this is because this was coming almost 5 days after the East African country was in a near total blackout imposed across Uganda ahead of the elections, the opposition says worried.
The coming back of the internet is exciting, but if you go back to the issue of security, it is really not bad switching off the internet in order to keep the people in the country calm.
For the last 4 to 5 days, it has been really very bad. In terms even of communicating to like friends, family members, yeah, there is a lot that we've lost.
I feel good because I've been offline like for almost a week, so I feel so good that now we are online. The internet has come back. I missed my WhatsApp, my friends. I could chat with my friends on WhatsApp, on Facebook, chat with my long friends outside abroad. So when the internet came back, so I'm so happy.
Elsewhere, Tunisian President Kais Saied meets with the residents of Etadamen, a suburb on the northwestern outskirts of Tunisia's capital, following 3 consecutive nights of riots in that area. Now, the unrest came despite a nationwide coronavirus pandemic lockdown declared last Thursday, the day that also marked 10 years since demonstrators forced dictator Zine El Abidine Ben Ali's fall from power. The army has deployed troops in the north, east and central Tunisia, according to the defense ministry. Now, Tunisia has registered more than 177,000 infections, including over 5,600 deaths since the pandemic erupted last year. The 4-day lockdown ended on Sunday night, but it was not immediately known if further restrictions would be imposed. Staying with the pandemic, and schools in Ghana reopen after being closed for 10 months to help control the spread of the novel coronavirus.
So you don't make time for learning unless maybe those students who are passionate and they know what they really want to do. So going back to school is very helpful. It's going to allow us to restart everything, and we are going to get our academic life back on track.
It will affect their educational background. The children, some of them have even forgotten there was something called school. And I think it is now our duty to bring them up, to revive them, psychologically, mentally, and everything.
I nearly lost my job because of the COVID, because I have to sit in the house. But you know, when you are working, you can't always give excuse because of your children. So I nearly lost my job. But my boss visited me and said, "Wow, your children." I said, "Because of." So we have to help the teachers so that we all feel free and go to our work.
Well, it is D-Day, the day the world is looking to the U.S., where the presidential inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden becoming America's new president and Kamala Harris as the country's new deputy president. Now, current President Donald Trump remains secluded in the White House at the center of a Capitol covered with troops and security barriers as the country prepares for the swearing-in.
We make the Kamala Harris chocolates with all vanilla sea salt caramel. So it's a sweet caramel. We sprinkle the salt in by hand, and then it mixes with either the milk or the dark chocolate. So you get a little bit of sweet, a little bit of salty, and then you get the bitterness from the chocolate. So with Joe Biden, we added a car, and it says "Riding with Biden." It has a picture of him in his aviators and Cup of Joe, just the things that people like about him. So I love wearing Chuck Taylors, and I think that she wears them to be casual and comfortable is really cool too. So we made sure we put those on there, but they're standing on a container of glass because she basically broke the glass ceiling wearing a pair of Chuck Taylors, which I think is super cool. You're welcome. And then being able to create something for our own very first female vice president really made me proud as a female entrepreneur. I think a gift of the Kamala Harris chocolates or the Joe Biden chocolates is a little bit of reconciliation. Because if you give it to someone who might not be on the same political side as you, I think you can share just something a little bit sweet together.
Members of the U.S. military, the police, and students from Howard University take part in a dress rehearsal for President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration outside the White House in Washington. Thousands of flags have been mounted and dress rehearsals have begun as the USA prepares to usher in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as the country's newly elected leaders. Just hours to the big day, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris resigned from the U.S. Senate to take up her new assignment.
And so I just wanted to say thank you. Of course, I'm not saying goodbye. In many ways, I'm now saying hello as your vice president.
On her own Twitter account as well, First Lady Melania Trump posted a farewell message to Americans.
The promise of this nation belongs to all of us. Do not lose sight of your integrity and values. Use every opportunity to show consideration for another person and build good habits into our daily lives. In all circumstances, I ask every American to be an ambassador of Be Best, to focus on what unites us, to raise above what divides us, to always choose love over hatred, peace over violence, and others before yourself.
The American Capitol remains under heavy security following the January 6th Capitol attacks. Nonprofit organization World Central Kitchen have been distributing hot meals to troops that have been deployed across Washington, D.C. ahead of the inauguration.
We saw that with the huge influx of soldiers, of National Guard troops, of other agencies like Secret Service and police and other groups that were coming in to protect the Capitol and the city at large during inauguration, that there was going to be a need to support them with fresh, healthy, nutritious meals.
Trump has still not congratulated Biden or invited him for the traditional tea visit in the Oval Office. He has generally been out of the public eye since the attack on the Capitol that triggered his historic impeachment a week later. Anita Nkonge, NTV.
Well, as I said, all eyes are on the United States as we await that inauguration of President-elect, that is Joe Biden, and of course his Vice President Kamala Harris. A lot is happening in D.C. As you know, it has been fortified as the Capitol ensures that nothing that happened 2 weeks ago in as far as people invading the Capitol will happen again, even as the inauguration is taking place today. And NTV will actually be airing the same live, and that live coverage will start from 2 p.m. So stay tuned. Well, back home, and something close to the conversation we're having today, something that has really shown light on the boy child in this case. The couple from Kiambaa, their son and their adopted nephew, who were brutally murdered earlier in the month, were laid to rest at their home in Karura at the weekend. Now, the emotional send-off attended by a huge crowd of mourners. Now, the prime suspects of a brazen attack, Lawrence Warunge and his girlfriend, Susan Muthoni, have been declared fit to stand trial to face murder charges after a mental assessment report found they were of sound mind. NTV's Seth Olale covered the emotional funeral service.
The weight of the caskets could not match the weight of the hearts that gathered here. The sorrow that pitched tent at Wangunu Primary School in Kiambu County's Kiambaa constituency was tangible. The remains of Nicholas Warunge, his wife Anne Wanjiku Njoroge, their son Christian Njenga, and adopted nephew Maxwell Njoroge lay in the midst of mourners, and among them Warunge's surviving and emotion-laden daughters, Grace and Rose, girls who have to deal with the reality that not only are their parents, brother and cousin dead, but at the hands of their brother who also wanted to take them out. A brother who confessed to the mutilation and murders and was not there for their family's send-off. They were not in a position to read their tributes, so their relatives did it for them.
I will carry you and your memories of you in my heart for now and for always.
I know it is only for now, and that one day we will reunite in heaven. May your souls rest in eternal peace.
We know you are up there, and we will always be there. When counting the stars, we'll be trying to locate you.
The atmosphere carried on the heaviness from the initial scene and details that threw off even some of the unexpected.
OCPD broke down na akaanza kulia. Mpaka yeye sasa komanda akasikia hana nguvu na yeye akaanza kulia. You probably know hawa watu wameona mambo mingi sana. So jambo ambalo lingefanya OCPD na komanda to break into tears si kitu ilikuwa ya mchezo.
Unlike many other funerals attended by political leaders, politics did not make it to the podium, but more of calls for empathy and justice.
Let us reflect a bit on what may be causing these kinds of incidences. What is causing so much anger among our people, including our children?
We don't want to hear only from media reports. We want to have an official statement after full investigations.
I would personally want one time to sit with Lawrence as his bishop. And maybe Lawrence will make a confession to his bishop and say why he was able to do this.
Take your candle. Medics from various hospitals in Kiambu County, in honor of their fallen colleague Anne Wanjiku and her family, paid special tribute, singing songs of hope amid the deflating storm. Nicholas was also a medic based in the United States of America. The four bodies were then moved to Karura village for a private burial ceremony reserved for family members and close friends. As the slain family was being rested at their home, the main suspects of the brazen attack, Lawrence Warunge and his girlfriend Susan Muthoni, received their medical assessment report, which indicated that they are fit to stand trial to face murder charges, having been found to be of sound mind. Warunge's family want the residents of Kiambu to remember their departed ones by emulating some of the beliefs and morals they stood up for. Seth Olale, NTV, Karura, Kiambu County.
Very heart-wrenching and still leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Well, as I said, we played that story because a lot has come out of it and a lot of light being shown on the prime suspect, who is a guy. So this morning we talk about mental health and try to understand why some things happen, trigger points, and of course, you know, the management of mental health as men walk this journey that's called life. And I'm having a Manel, and as you know, I do not like doing this, but I think it's important that we have a kikao cha wazee, as I said earlier, so that we understand from the men as they speak to us about their journeys, and we also understand their struggles through this whole mental health journey. Well, to help us understand this better in studio, I'm with Tetu Shani. He is a music artist and he also has lived experience with mental illness. Also joining us virtually, we have Dr. Oscar Gidua, who is a forensic psychologist and also a member of the mental health task force put together by the government last year. We're also joined virtually by Kim Thirumungai, who is a creative and a mental health advocate, and also joining us virtually Shaltuti Shaban, who is an ad man and brand builder, and of course he also has lived experience with mental illness. Thank you all for joining us on this conversation, and I'll start with the Daktari amongst us. Now, you are the forensic psychologist, and the story we just ran is one of those that falls right in your purview. I know we cannot comment much on it now that it's in court, but have you ever seen such a case?
First of all, thank you so much, Gladys, for having me. I think it's really great that that you're having this Manel, as I heard you call. And you know, of course, the issue of men's mental health is a big one, and it's one that is very close to my heart. And as a forensic psychologist, like you've quoted, is one that I've actually dealt with a lot. The first thing that I'd like viewers to know is that about 85% of the crimes that are caused on this earth collectively are as a result of actions by men. So whether that is because of men's, biology or whatever it is, we'll get into a bit deeper. But as you can see, as a forensic psychologist, definitely majority of the clients that I've worked with and the people I've seen are men. So yes, I have seen a lot of that by men, and I've seen things like that. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of questions still about the case at hand, but I've seen a lot of them throughout my career over the last 20 years or so. Thank you.
And of course, this is something that the prime suspect actually, said he did it, but he's been assessed and he's of sound mind, and people cannot reconcile this whole setup. Is this something that's familiar to you?
Well, it depends on what the assessing professionals were looking for. And it's important for viewers to also understand there's two things that normally go into a legal situation like his. Number one, there's a question of whether someone is competent to stand trial. And that means, can someone understand the charges brought against them? And can they also help to assist their own defense in a meaningful manner? So that's what normally the courts would be looking for at the very beginning, to see, can he be read his charges? Now, that's not the end of the story. At the end of it, normally there's going to be other assessors appointed by the court to see if at the time of committing the crime or the offense, whether he was of sound mind at that time. And of course, those are terms that are used loosely, because saying sound mind and unsound mind is not psychological. However, it's a legal term which they use. So just to let people understand that the legal process is not what you'd expect it to look like, because they have to follow some certain protocols.
All right, so let's focus on our conversation of the day, and we are talking about men and their mental wellness. And definitely, as I said, it's important to have or understand what they walk in and the shoes they walk in. And Daktari, as we said earlier, there is a dynamic difference when it comes to mental wellness between the two genders. Talk of the same.
Okay, so thank you again, Gladys. I don't want to hog too much time, but I think what I can help viewers to understand is that there's definitely a huge difference between men and women when it comes to mental health and mental wellness. But then I also like to say it's because it depends on what lens you wear. So there are three of them that I like to educate people around. And the first one is biologically, that there's a huge difference between men and women. Just to survive for a man, even from the moment of conception, is a miracle. The Y chromosome is by vast margins weaker than the X chromosome by just its form, its longevity in terms of life. So even conception itself is already a miracle when it comes to the male gender. Then you have to talk about socialization. The mental health that is affected because of socialization is very interesting. In society, when you're raising a boy versus raising a girl, even throughout the whole developmental lifespan, men are not allowed to express themselves. If they express themselves, it's a sign of weakness. Why are you crying? You find 2-year-olds being told, stop crying, you're a man. And I'm thinking, oh, come on, you're 2 years old. How are you a man, you know? And then also, of course, when it comes to things like gender roles, and I know that there's a big fight and a big discussion around, allowing women into the workplace and breaking the glass ceiling. You've seen Kamala Harris becoming the first vice president in the U.S. That's amazing. But then the expectations that are placed on men, Gladys, are sometimes unrealistic. Just from when they're young, in terms of performance, you're told you'll be a failure if you don't have X and you don't have Y, if you don't drive this, if you don't drive the other, if you don't own this, if you don't own the other. And these kind of pressures might actually contribute to what you're actually seeing in terms of mental health. And the last thing, so I said, first thing was biology, second was socialization, and the last one is outcomes. When we look at studies about men and women's mental health, we find that men suffer way more when it comes to disorders like anxiety and depressive disorders. You find that men are more represented and even psychosis, but then women are represented more in things to do with like trauma and PTSD. So lifelong, you find that men have a huge disadvantage because of those three things that I've mentioned.
All right, and we'll delve deeper into the same as we go along. Now, let's talk to those that have won this shoe. I'll start off with you, Tetu. I mean, you are a music artist. Most people know you in that space, but you have been lending your voice to the mental health space. Why?
I can't remember when it was, but I wrote a tweet where I said, I said something like, I'm just putting this out there. I've been struggling with depression for 2 years. And the response was kind of crazy. It was surprising for me because I'm just admitting that I struggle with something that a lot of people struggle with. But then it started to provoke these conversations with like men and people in my space about what that's like. And I realized that there's this wall that particularly people in entertainment have placed up. And that I had brought that wall down and said, hey, listen, I'm not perfect. And then that made me realize, okay, these conversations, what other conversations can we have? And in particular, not just with men, but particularly men in my space, which is the entertainment space, So since then, I've been passionate about having those kinds of conversations because I'm seeing real consequences to things like stress and anxiety, things like depression, the silent suicide sort of, you could argue, I don't want to call it a pandemic, but there's just very high rates of these things. And this is global. It's not just in Kenya, it's around the world that stress and anxiety is at unprecedented levels right now. So being a musician, I have a voice, I have an ability to dig deep within myself and articulate something in a way that someone else maybe perhaps can't. And so I've said, all right, cool, let me just take that responsibility and just step by step see what other conversations I can have and what other walls can come down as a result of my music and the voice that I lend to this issue.
Yeah. And we're also joined, as I mentioned, by Kim Thiru Mungai. What has been your journey?
Gladys, thank you for having me, first of all. It's good to see everybody on the panel. I think Chetty is a very good friend of mine, so it's very good to see him speak up about this. Now, my journey has been a very up and down. I've been suffering from depression from when I was 16. I'm 32. And I sadly had to go through a lot of hard times with anxiety and even having had to take medicines just to fall asleep. So as I grew older, I found out that this was through small traumas and small things that I had to go through while I was younger. This is as a dark skin being compared. We live in a country where light skins are preferred, and being told that you'll never make it as a dark skin. So being compared to other people all the time from the time you're like 2 or 3 years old. To be compared to people in school. Because I'm a creative, I am more into acting, into, dancing and such things. So, my normal day-to-day school things were never on point. And so like Dr. said earlier, as a man, as a boy, you're told, no, you have a set way of life. So that's those many different things, including my parents' divorce didn't help, traveling a lot as a young child and being open to different cultures was a good thing, but also a bad thing at the same time, because then you're impacted by so many things. But yeah, it had been a journey and a half until I got my daughter, and I realized and had to sit myself down and say, what do I really want? My daughter to say, God forbid I passed away today, what do I want my friends to say about me to my daughter? And the one thing I realized was that I wanted them to say that, you know what, your father lived his best life by choosing him, choosing his mental health, putting you first, of course, but in a way that by putting you first, he's put himself first. So that for me is what made the change into deciding that, you know what, I'm going to put my mental health in check and to let go of the medicine side and focus more of the cognitive therapy way of doing things.
Interesting. And for you, Shaltuti, it's not very different, right?
Hi, Gladys. Thank you for having me. And hello to the rest of the panel. Yes, mine is not entirely different. But just like Kim's story, I think I have been battling this for quite a while now. And I come from a school of thought where I think that everybody has some kind of trauma. Could be family related, could be societal related. But the truth of the matter is that we all have some trauma, and we have different triggers that make us react certain types of ways when we are faced with certain situations. So for me, over the years, it's just been a constant battle of, I may be jumping the gun with this, for example, but failure, or you feel like you do not have a support system, especially people who are not in line with your train of thought at that particular time. You feel like if I reach out to someone or if I speak about 1, 2, 3 things, they're going to look at me this way or they're going to perceive me this way. So you are constantly walking on a shell whereby you do not want to put yourself in a situation where people are going to be judging you because of a lack of understanding or coming from a background of not knowing what it is you're going through. But I think mental health is something I'm very, very passionate about currently. And with the pandemic happening last year, it just made me open or dig deeper into this Pandora's box of trying to establish or trying to be in touch with some of these feelings that I've been putting away, or some of these things that I've been evading for a very long time, because they all sort of came and they crept up on me, and I found myself in a very, very dark hole.
Okay.
So I feel like, yeah.
Now, when you say you've been battling this, what exactly are you battling?
So I have been having depression on and off. And mine has been attributable mainly to more or less the family side of the spectrum. So we've had some issues of the family. There was a split between my parents. There was bankruptcy in between there somewhere. And as a child, there's only so much you can deal with, because you can see and you can observe everything that is happening around you, but you cannot quite be roped into conversations. You can only observe and suffer in silence simply because you're a child, and there's only so much that you can understand at that certain or at that particular time. But in retrospect, I think most parents or most guardians fail to remember that we have very, very cognitive memories. We never forget stuff, especially when we're in a certain age. Because for me, when some of these things were happening, I was a teenager. I was 13, 14. And at that age, it's very, very hard to be able to forget some things. You're at an age where you're able to comprehend some things that are happening, and you're very, very aware of some changes. So if today, for example, you live in your own house or you have a place you can call home, and tomorrow auctioneers come in and more or less take everything that you've known to be yours your whole life, and you are more or less left with nothing, it affects you in some type of way. And if you do not have a system where it's an open space to talk about some things, these emotions or all this, the turmoil that is happening inside, it just keeps building up and you do not have an outlet. So you find yourself having situations where you have outbursts. I remember, I do not want to term this as psychosis, but when I was 15, I had an episode where I more or less lost it. I went wild for a minute. I couldn't be contained. It was just a short 1 hour or so of madness, because you have all this rage inside of you that you've not been releasing, you've not had an outlet for so long, and you've gotten to a point where you just have an outburst.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we'll walk that journey with you in a bit. And before I get to the doctor, let me hear from Tetu. You said you'd been battling with depression for 2 years, but just listening to everyone else, they now can see the dots led back to when they were teenagers. Have you also seen that in retrospect?
Yeah. I definitely can see some kinds of ties to me being a young man. And I think what a lot of these gentlemen are saying is, that the root sometimes is the same, is that you have these emotions, but no one teaches you how to constructively unpack these emotions and express them. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is just like, as far as, remedies for depression or of course there's counseling, but one thing that I've realized is that we have not built structures within the family to be able to prevent something like that happening. So a lot of times the family is like, oh my goodness, what do we, okay, our son is, depressed. But then I wonder, like, what would happen if we had programs that would help parents, siblings, cousins, aunties, uncles? How do you deal with a young man? How do you deal with a young boy who's going through all these transitions, puberty, all this kind of stuff, and is unable to talk? I know that my son is 4 years old right now, and I'm trying to sort of build this culture of asking, how are you doing? And he's 4. And every single time I ask him, how are you? Like, how was your day? He'll tell me. He's like, Baba, I did this and this. And then we fought with Nani. and then I beat him. I'm like, no, don't beat people. Like, this is how you handle this kind of blah, blah, blah. And I realized that not because my family didn't love me, they didn't know what to do with someone like me. Now, I will say this, that I have a personality that I would say is more prone to certain things. And I would say things like stress, anxiety, and depression, just because I'm in my head a lot. And that does present challenges. So I feel like, looking back, I saw the dots, but looking forward, like, I wonder what kind of things we could do within the family before someone goes to see a therapist that could kind of create this safety net for people to be able to express themselves.
And that's a great perspective. Daktari, just listening to this gentleman, a lot of them represent many men out there who are labeled rebels, especially during that teenagerhood. And I think that is the age that set them apart from the rest when it comes to their mental wellness. Talk about that.
First of all, let me applaud my fellow men for speaking up on national platform. Guys, great job. I think it's amazing when men can open up and talk about their vulnerabilities to other people. It helps more of us come out of it and start sharing, because we really have never had a platform, and even if we've had a few here and there, it's really atypical. So I really applaud you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for doing that. Then to your question, Gladys, I think that there are many times and many places, and if you really want to learn about a man, and I tell people this because I've really spent a lot of time looking at men and looking at ourselves. I mean, I'm one, so I really, in trying to understand myself as well as other men, the developmental stages of a man. And I think I wish people could stand that these developmental stages of a man are so critical and so key. If you look at the talking adolescence, puberty, we're talking about it's a time of deep searching of identity. It's a time of deep searching of belonging. Mm-hmm. And if at that time you do not have that, and I like what one of your guests said. He said he didn't have the support, and he wishes he had. That's a really big telltale sign. And I also want to say that society definitely plays a big role in how men are able to express themselves. And during teenagehood, if you think about our schooling system as well, it really does not help either in terms of supporting people who might have challenges in their mental health, in terms of emotional support. If you don't perform well in school, you're called names. I remember growing up, you had teachers calling you guys, cabbages, and, like, you guys are all dumb, like, and really insulting you. And so, of course, what that does is that it really goes internally to someone. And the thing with boys, though, is that men will externalize their anger and their mental health issues. So you'll find a lot of like violence coming out of it. You'll find a lot of rebellion, quote unquote, what you called, like rebellion and the bad boy syndrome. All these are reactions to society's lack of embracing a man who's going through so much tumultuous issues in their life and having nowhere to really go to. So that also brings me to a good point that was raised by, he raised about parents. And I think it's time for parents to show up. It's time for parents to actually really realize that both boys and girls require love and warmth and support in the home. And so the idea that, when a boy is born, someone says, he'll be fine, he'll survive in this world. It's a man's world anyway, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And so you find that this boy grows up without any direction. And then when he messes up and he does some stuff that is not seen to be so good, everyone says, but he's just being a boy. And that's normally the problem. He's just being a boy. But then nobody really sits down with him and talks to him. Because when he starts hitting about 30 and going, people are expecting him to raise a family. Picture that. I mean, this guy was never prepared by anybody. Mm-hmm. Then now all of a sudden he's supposed to have a family, raise them, and really lead them. That's dangerous stuff. And I think we can go deep into that sometime. That's why when you see all these things you see on social media, people talking about men and what they're doing, cheating, all of these things, they're all as a result of this lack of proper direction from when someone's young.
Oh, wow. And still on the societal construct of how a man should act or react to situations, for you, Kim, what have been the struggles throughout?
That's a very, 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 very nice question. I'll give you an example. I'm such not your typical man, right? I currently have blonde hair. A couple of years back, I used to have braids. I have a nose ring. I have a tongue ring. I have piercings. I have tattoos. And please note, I do have a full-time job outside the acting and the entertainment industry. And sadly, something happened a while back, just in the height of my depression. I walked into a house with my uncles and aunties, and I remember I had very blonde braids. And when I walked in, my uncle asked me whether I was gay. And I asked him why. It's like, what type of man would put on such hair and have piercings and things like that? And I said, what does my appearance decide whether I'm a man or not? And what is that definition of what a man is? And that in its own right is where the problem comes in. We are in a new generation where the females have been given a lot of, they've been focused on, which is not a bad thing. It's a great thing. I love it to the fullest. The problem is then now the boy child, for the lack of words, has not been taught how to, one, deal with a very powerful woman and who knows what she wants out of life. And in such then gets into the problems that Dr. was saying, with the violence and all of that. And then also the upbringing, in the sense that the men don't really tell you what a man is meant to be doing. Honest truth. We are told the 3 Ps of a husband are to preach, protect, and provide. But what does that entail? So we're not really being taught what really needs to happen as a man. We don't see our fathers struggle when they don't have money. We're told, yeah, we'll deal with it. They're very undercover and, they're hidden. When there are marital problems at home, we don't see that. So in that same breath, for us, we're like, okay, clearly a man is meant to persevere. But even that perseverance hits a limit. We know we all have a limit to everything that we go through. So in that same breath, it's very hard to really just define what a man is. Because the concept of it now has been lost. Because in honest truth, the woman has also been brought up to be the 3 Ps, to provide, protect, and to preach for the house, which is not a bad thing. Again, I say that. So it's now for us to now define what does that mean? What does that mean for the man? So as we're bringing the younger generation up, we need to learn that what is the definition of a man?
And speaking about the definition of a man, I mean, we all learn from our parents because they are the ones who model life for us. And there's something you mentioned, Charlotte Tutti, that your parents went their separate ways and other things now after that happened to you and your family. As a guy, watching your parents and them going their separate ways, what kind of impact did it have on you?
Well, it had an immense impact simply because my relationship with my dad has more or less been very existent for a very long time. But over the years, I knew he was there. I knew if I needed to talk to him or I needed access to him, I knew I could find him. But then again, with the separation, it just meant that there was this void. Now I'm only more or less accustomed to having one supportive arm of the patronage that is supposed to be parenthood. So there are issues or there are things you cannot go and start talking to your mom about as a man. And I feel like this is part of the societal construct whereby there are things you cannot talk to about the women in our life about, which is a very bad misconception in my view. Yes, there are things that need to be talked to by men, but then I feel like at that particular time, if the woman in your life can give you a listening ear, it helps. But then again, you see, with the construct that as a man, you're supposed to persevere or you're supposed to go through life with your head held high, no matter what you're going through in your personal life, no matter what the turmoil is, you find yourself struggling with very, very basic things in your day-to-day. And the only available parent or the only available guardian at that time, you do not feel like you can go to them about this particular issue simply because of how society has more or less structured itself. That there are things you go to your mom to talk about and there are things you go to your dad or a male figure in your life to talk about. And given the relationship with my dad, I found it over the years very, very difficult to build relationships with fellow men. Only now that there has been, in the past 2-3 years, there has been a change in that. But you see, as much as, yes, you are in a very, very good space with your mom or your grandma or whoever is in your life as a woman at that particular point, there are things you do not go to them with. And now these are the things that end up being unresolved. You just keep piling and piling and piling up. And you really have no one to help you unpack how you're feeling, or there is no recourse towards helping you try and solve some of these things. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is all of us have a breaking point. And by the time you're getting to your breaking point, you really do not know where to start from. because you've just been piling up stuff for a very, very long time. And when you try and track it back, it goes 10, 15 years back, and you're like, how did I end up here? So yeah, it's been a challenging fit, but then again, the more I've been open to exploring this or walking this journey, the more I've been exposed to very different settings on a daily.
Okay.
And yeah.
We'll talk more about how you're turning that around for yourself. Before we take a short break, I'd like to hear from Tetu. You're married and have a son, as you said, you're a father.
Yeah.
Were you ever prepared for this role? Do you feel you were prepared enough?
No, that's the easy answer is no. I've literally just been figuring this thing out as I go along. And I find it so interesting that in almost every single one of the responses, a man's mental wellness is inevitably linked to their father. And of course, you know, the gentleman can talk and see whether that's true or not. But I feel like even the setup of the modern world makes it so that your father is absent from your life. When I think about older cultures, and I think about the role of a father and a son, it's often in older cultures and many thousands of years ago, it was you know, if I'm hunting, I'm taking my son along with me, right? If I'm gathering, I'm taking my son along with me, and along with that, there's this process of teaching, instruction. Okay, how do we handle this kind of a situation? How do we whatever? But in the modern world, when dad is off to the office at 7 a.m. and back in the house at, you know, Lord knows what time, because he has his own issues, so he needs to have a drink with his boys, you know. What impact does that have on the young man that is growing up and seeing this, you know? And so I know, and I want to be gentle on fathers, because I know that even for my dad, he's dealing with his own baggage and was figuring things out. But I think another thing is, like, when I think about fatherhood and mental wellness, again, in the context of me and my son, I just need to be there with him. Like, I need to structure my life in a way that I can share certain experiences with him, and he can look to me to see how I'm handling it. I remember one time I was at home and something had really stressed me out, and I broke down, I was crying. And my wife was about to chase my son out, and I said, no, let him stay. Because it might be controversial, but I wanted him to see me crying so that he begins to process as a boy, so it's not this thing where Baba just disappears to another room and handles his stuff. So you mean this is part of what it means to be a man? I think these are the kinds of things that we have to explore. Just
clearly being very intentional about this. And do you find yourself at times stopping and thinking, oh my God, I just acted exactly like my dad did?
Hey. And I think it gets worse. You know, I'm 35, and I honestly have this theory where these things catch up to you once you pass, you enter third floor. But like literally, there are things both good and bad where I'll do something and it's subconscious, and I'm like, wait a minute. As in, you get me? I'm being exactly the way my dad was, and in a way that back then I didn't appreciate that. It's so crazy. So it's a constant daily thing where you wake up in the morning and you say, how can I be present and available for my son? Because it's, again, a lot of it is subconscious.
Okay. And Dr. Ari, when we come back from the break, I'd like you to talk a little bit about childhood traumas, because I think this is one thing that's becoming very clear for both male and female. But mostly now that we're talking about the men today, the impact of the same and how we can ensure that we harness our own mental wellness with that information in mind. But before that short break, we had asked you, why is it that men find it so hard to talk about their mental health? Because this is another thing that also impedes them from getting the help they need. Aquila says men don't see mental health as relevant to them and don't reach out for vital support for fear of being judged. We have Elia Chumba who says, mental health, I think it's because we lost consciousness. Interesting perspective. Susan Masai says, who speaks about their own mental illness? Well, I can tell you many people that do. Agnes Njoki says, I think the society has contained us to think that males are a supergender, but they are not supposed to have and show feelings. Our traditions made us think that men are strong and crying or sharing your problems is a sign of weakness. This tradition is carried out till today, whereby boys are circumcised publicly and they are not supposed to shed a tear. Can we normalize crying among men? Agnes, very well said. Jerin Jogona says, fear of what the world, society, and human beings will say or think about them, whereas it's very okay not to be okay. Hashtag mental health awareness, hashtag mental health matters is very essential to everyone. Jatelo Michael Ocheng says, society has trained us that way, if we open up, you are perceived as weak and not man enough to handle the pressure. Yeah, that has been said here over and over again, and we've seen it amongst ourselves. Abdul Nasir Ibrahim says, lack of understanding, reasonable person to talk to, and most people are not familiar with mental health issues. People with mental illness are not accorded the proper help or support they direly need, and we live in a society that shames them and drives them away. True. San Ole Jairo says, because at a very tender age, a boy child is taught to be hard and never cry under any situation or talk about his non-capabilities to do anything. Then to rescue the boy child, we'll have to start from fathers to older brothers. We hear you. Brolin Gichi says, boy child equals to expectations, while girl child equals to adoration. Interesting perspective. So how do you, if we can have that back, I wish I could get that question he was putting across. How do you expect a shotgun peel to go through a revolver barrel? Very deep, man. Thank you for putting that across. Nemhud Munga says, we were groomed differently in the society, and such kind of act will be regarded as weak. And by the way, who is ready to be associated with weak men? What is the definition of weakness? I think that is something we need to redefine, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But keep your comments coming through. That hashtag is new normal. Stay with us.
Despite the setback and challenges, George was determined and founded Agri-Tech Organic Farm Company na bado anakiuka nayo, which means going beyond and breaking barriers.
So kazi yenye tunafanya hapa ni ukulima wa wadudu na worms and insects. Now what we have here is now the ready vermicompost.
Mbona hii soil iko wet?
The reason as to why it's wet because when we are feeding tunazipea mbolea ya ng'ombe yenye ni moist kiasi. At times it might be a challenge ukishake pore pore. Worms zitaenda chini. So it requires you move very fast.
And when it comes to organic farming, tunaweza kiuka aje na ni benefit gani hizi vitu zinatuletea?
Tumekuwa tukitumia chemicals here and there, and this has led into a challenge of food security. But now when we come into organic farming, first we work from the soil up to the plant.
Tuzidi na Hustle in association with Safaricom. New year comes with New Year deals. Renew your corporate subscription and get a bonus. Subscribe to Nation e-paper for 3 months and get 1 week absolutely free. 6 months and get 2 weeks absolutely free. 1 year and get 3 weeks absolutely free. To sign up, visit epaper.nationmedia.com or email subscription@ke.nationmedia.com. Offer valid till 28th February 2021.
Thank you for joining us and staying with us. This is Your World. My name is Gladys Gashanja, and today, as I said, tuna kikao cha wazee. I am hosting gentlemen who are here to speak about their own mental health journey. It has not been an easy one, but they are better for it today because they now are aware of who they are and why they even got here and have taken it up to actually ensure that they manage it better for themselves. And also helping us with the science of it is Daktari, and Dr. Oscar Githuo is a forensic psychologist. Tetu Shani in studio with me. He's a music artist. Kim Thiru Mungai, a creative and mental health advocate. And of course, Shalta Tuti Shaban, who is an admin and brand builder. Now, Daktari, when we went to break, I mentioned it is important that we touch on this childhood trauma that seems to be coming up in all the conversations we've had today. And I'm sure you also saw from the responses we got from our social media platforms.
Great. Thank you so much, Gladys. I think that this is a very, very important topic that we're talking about. So the idea of trauma, when you think about trauma, think of it as a bank account where you get 10,000 shillings today or 5,000 shillings today, then you go and deposit it to your account, whatever bank it is, okay? Mm-hmm. So when you're young, you have these people telling you, don't cry, you're a man, you're 2 years old. So you're shocked and taken aback. And then you deposit that. And then you walk a bit down the road, you find the teachers who beat you up, and then they don't really support you and you're crying, you deposit that. When you're going through teenagehood, you don't have the mentor, you don't have all these things, you deposit that. When you're 19, you're rejected. In fact, we'll talk about that a bit and how it plays out in relationships. I was talking in another forum and we were talking about how many times a man is rejected in a day versus how many times a woman is rejected in a day. So you find that the guy is rejected 25 times a day, he deposits that. Now, the thing about bank accounts, it's rare that you find a bank account where you just deposit without having to withdraw. Aren't you think about that all these traumas, as they're being deposited throughout the lifetime of a man, even as late as 70, 75, at one point they will be withdrawn. That's why you find that men have more prevalence of lifestyle diseases. Things like heart disease, which is the #1 killer in the whole world. Things like strokes, going through other issues which are stress-related. You find that men are going to withdraw those things at one point in one form or another. Some people will end up becoming violent. Others are going to end up having substance abuse issues. Others are going to have relationship issues. You're going to have even non-performance at work. You're going to find things, I dare say, things like even corruption, by the way. We're busy talking about it from a very different thing, and we have all these laws set up in place. But there's a lot of trauma. Our country has a lot of trauma. And you find that even we have an obsession, Gladys, and I'm going to say this. I know it's something we can actually discuss. The obsession of Kenyans and men, especially, we buy land every 2 seconds. Think about it. Why? How many plots can I own? I buy a plot in a place, another one. But all this is a result of this trauma. When something is taken away from you forcefully, you have this constant obsession, even generationally, to get it back. And I know people might not even see that right now. I understand, but I promise you, there's a book I'm writing about the historical trauma of Kenyans. And these are some of the things that I'm finding, that where you find more trauma, you find more behavioral issues, and you have actually more mental health issues piling up. So yes, I think that childhood trauma plays a big role. But I also want to say it's not just childhood trauma, because there's no button that's normally pressed. It's just the kind of things that Kenyans go through on a day-to-day. I mean, it's not uncommon. You're doing your daily commute to go to work. There's a car accident, and there's a body strewn on the ground, and you have to see that. Then you go to work. It's not uncommon to see on social media. You see, like the other day, I saw a bank robbery happening. Someone has been shot, and it's shown on social media. So you're constantly being re-traumatized every day by small things that you don't even understand, and those will definitely be withdrawn. The bank analogy holds.
Very well put. And I think that makes many people start to think again, the kind of baggage we are all walking around with. Now, Kim, there's something that somebody has brought up, and I think this is so important, and Daktari has touched on it. Handling rejection. This is the one thing that they say for a guy cuts like a sword, eh? And on a daily, whether it's at work, relationships, whatever it is, it's something that you have to face. What has been the role of the same in your life and your mental health?
I believe that is mainly the definition of reason of my depression, that I have had depression, sorry. I don't like owning it because it's not mine. I'm going to get over it. So it's like a sickness. You have to, don't own anything, then it becomes yours forever. I do believe that rejection plays a massive, massive role when it comes to anxiety, especially because then you're doubting yourself a lot because you're always used to being rejected. Like for me, myself, one of the things that happened was I was rejected, not directly, but by father when they split up, as my colleague here said. It was that whole distance. And even there's a day where my mom, we had just moved back to Kenya from traveling, and my mom calls my father saying, hey, listen, the kids want to see you. What's going on? And he keeps saying he's coming to the house, he's coming to pick us up, he's coming to pick us. And that lasted for like a good 2 weeks. And in that, my mom just called him upset, saying, you know what, if you don't want to do anything with your kids, just say so. And so we didn't know at the same time that he was dealing with his own demons on the other side. But then therein lies the different issues that we have. So that rejection that he gave me and my brother made us feel very, even till today, we have this habit, that my brother and I have this habit that if you're coming to, let's say, pick me up from my house, I get ready when you're at the door because of the trauma of getting ready before, and then my father or somebody comes, picks us up 4 or 5 hours later, or does not pick us up at all, you know? So that has become it's become a natural thing for us to do. Even when it came to, dating, growing up, like, I said earlier, being dark-skinned. I will lie to you, I started enjoying being dark-skinned maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was like, oh my God, we are really good looking, Dark skins are amazing, man, especially if you're tall and dark. Oh my God, the women are here for all of it. So even that same breath, that rejection comes to you hard. But also we've been taught that, if you go for what you want, you're going to get it. But if you work hard, you're actually going to get it. But somebody told me this the other day, saying, just because you work hard does not mean you make it in life. That stuck with me. I was like, actually, it's not about working hard, it's about working smart. And in there lies the problem that we have.
I hear you loud and clear, and I see the other gentleman smiling, and I'm thinking, to a lady, tall, dark, and handsome is the definition of the guy you want to have. So it's interesting hearing it from the man saying that this skin has actually had me rejected. Tuti, I'm sure this is just one form of rejection. For you, what have you found to do that always protects you from the rejection the world has to offer? I mean, that business deal that doesn't come through, boys that don't feel you or, stab you back and stuff like that.
So for me, for a very long time, I chose the evasive route, whereby I coined this mantra for myself of zero expectations. whereby I really never got so vested in some things. I have for a very long time been very particular about the battles I wanted to choose for myself. And so you find that for me, rejection played itself out in the sense that, there's this guy who is my father, and he's more or less chosen not to be part of my life. For me, that is rejection in itself. And for a very long time, that has always been like the base of all my relationships. I'm like, you know what? It might have been the wrong time, the wrong thing to think at that particular time, but I became of the school of thought that, you see, the one person I expected to be there no matter what, more or less rejected me, though indirectly, because I really do not know the genesis, or I do not know what happened, because as Kim said, they are dealing with their own things that they never really let us see that side of them. But then again, I was like, you see, him not being there, or him choosing to quote unquote reject me, means that I should just adopt this mantra or this life of zero expectations, because if what is more or less a birthright for you is not coming to you naturally, then the world has nothing to offer you. The world owes you nothing. So I used the rejection, or that kind of rejection in retrospect to that relationship, to more or less be my fuel, to make me work twice as harder, twice as smarter, just to ensure that I do not find myself in situations where I am constantly feeling rejection, or facing rejection, sorry. So you'll find that be it work, I will put in twice the effort. I will try and make sure that I am excelling in other aspects of my life, so that I do not, it's more or less trying to compensate for this thing that I have been carrying on my shoulder for a very long time. So I ensure that I try and make myself happy in that aspects of my life, some aspects of my life are working for me, so that I do not have to constantly think about that one bad relationship that I've had, or that rejection that I got the other day. Or so for me, it's always been like, this didn't work out. I tried my best. I'm moving on to the next thing. So moving on to the next thing for me is always also something that has been helping me cope over the years. But then when I think about it, or rather when it was brought to my attention that it was not a healthy habit, then it just made me sit and try and recount situations that were actual rejections that I overlooked, that if probably I would have tried to go back and see what happened or what I did wrong, I could have more or less tried to change that going forward. So you see, I've more or less been leaving open cans everywhere, because I do not go back for closure, or I do not go back to ensure that I've dealt with the situation once and for all. I'll always leave it hanging around there somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And just on the same tattoo, I mean, rejection is one thing, but of course, for you to know that rejection is what has been pushing you towards the mental illness space calls for self-awareness. So you say 2 years ago, you came out and said, okay, fine, I've been dealing with this for the longest of time. What got you to that point?
What got me to that point was lockdown. So literally, because I had reached a point where I kept my life busy enough that there's just stuff I didn't have to think about, right? So if I'm just grinding. Let me tell you something, there are a lot of workaholic men who have mad issues, and that the source of that workaholism is escape, right? So I come to this scenario, you know, the president says, okay, no live events. Boom, all of a sudden I'm out of work, I'm at home a lot, and now, I have all this time to think. And all these memories and trauma start coming back in. And then I had to make a decision. I said, okay, I can't run away from this stuff forever. I have to now begin to confront these things. And essentially, what I mean by confront is I just had to sit down almost like the way we're sitting right now and say, okay, tattoo, okay, hi tattoo. All right, let's talk about this, man. How do you really feel about this? And how did it really make you feel when this happened? And why do you react? Why is it that when someone triggers something, you react, and then you wonder, why on earth did I react that way? What was the source of this? And then inevitably it was reaching towards a place where I had to make an admission and say, listen, because I was just like, oh, you know, no, sometimes I'm sad, you know, or sometimes I'm low. I said, wait, hold on, wait. No. You have been struggling with depression. And as soon as I made that admission, there was almost this like liberation that came through it, because now there's tools to be able to deal with that. But what tools do you use for, yeah, I'm sometimes just sad, or yeah, sometimes, you know, but anyway, many pressure, you know, okay, like a lot of that confession, saying it out loud, led to a lot of the changes, lifestyle changes that I've made today. I made changes in my diet. I started exercising. I started intentionally creating free time for myself and my family to just go and sit in a garden barefoot in the grass. It sounds so crazy and hippie, but literally these were the transformations that led to me being in a place of better mental health right now.
Okay, and self-awareness is so critical, whether female or male, but for the men, and that's why we are asking that question, why do men find it so difficult to talk about their mental health issues? Daktari, this is something that most men will struggle with. Fine, society has said, you know, put them in a box, but then again, self is not aware that they are in crisis. So what should we the men, be aware of?
Well, thank you about that, about the question. You've really touched on what the key is, and the key begins with ourselves and with myself. Before we point outwards at society, before we point at partners, before we point at anybody else, the beginning of healing for all men and the beginning of self-awareness is just that. Becoming the doctor of your own life in about 5 areas. And I love what Tetu said about some of the changes that have actually made him become who he is today and becoming more aware. So I like to say that if you're blessed by God to have 5 digits on your finger, or on your hand, sorry, if you have 5 fingers, to put one of these aspects on each of those fingers. And even if you don't, just imagine it. And the first one is physically. You've got to know yourself. You know how you normally are. Are you feeling lethargic now? Are you oversleeping? Are you, being hyper? The things that you can actually become the expert of. What is your norm, basically? And if you start seeing yourself getting off the rails around those norms, then you'll know it's time for something else. The second one is about emotionally. And it's really hard many times for men to even understand their own emotions because of what we've talked about in this show over and over. There's no real mentorship around what emotional expression or even admission is. So it's starting to know, what kind of temperament do I have? Am I more of an easygoing person? Am I a person to react to something this way normally or not? And just really get to know yourself emotionally. The third one is behaviorally. Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Are you someone who gets your energy by being around other people? Are you a person who likes to stay alone and kind of like craft things for yourself, or not? And then if you see yourself becoming a bit more reclused, secluded, being isolated and stuff, that could be a signal for you that something is going awry. Then look at your relationships. And this is where I really, really like to talk to men. Relationships, you can really tell what's going on with your own mental health based on the kind of relationships you're actually generating. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about relating with even family members, with your colleagues, with your friends. You find people avoiding you, and then you ask someone, they say, oh, you've become snappy, or you don't listen to people. That's also a signal for you to probably look at. And then the last one that I like to talk about is spiritually. And get this, I didn't say religiously, I said spirituality. And there's a very big difference, because spirituality is what people gain by going and engaging in religious activities. Spirituality is what people also gain by going and walking in nature, or even being with somebody they really treasure and mentor and sitting down. So if you find that you're now becoming cynical about things, about life, and especially now that we have COVID-19 amongst us, if you find yourself that you're becoming nihilist, or you don't think that there's any need for the future, let's live now, you find yourself saying more YOLOs, you only live once, let's blow all the money we've spent, there's probably a problem, and you need to look at that. And of course, I'll talk about then what you do, because these are the things which you look for, but then how do you then turn it around to actually make it better for yourself? So for me, those are the things that you've got to watch out for as a man. And also, I think probably, and of course, we'll talk about how to wrap it all up, but it's very important for men to find a support network, and I'll talk about how we can exactly do that after.
And that is so crucial. Yes, we'll get to it right after this short break. But before we get it, let's hear from you. Why do men have a hard time talking about mental health? Well, Joseph Saye says, because we never follow our minds. They may not be going where we are going. And another mental disease is to keep talking about your mind. We avoid those and focus on matters of international development, like whether Arsenal should be relegated, whether Museveni should be sworn in without sanctions, and whether the prices of petrol should remain constant post-COVID. That kind of sounds like escapism to me. Blessed Chiva Peter says the answer is very simple, because nobody will bother to listen to them, even the society itself. That is also a perception that is also being broken down today. Minor Jose says, the society teaches not to. That being strong is being able to handle everything, including emotional, psychological, and mental issues, including those that require professional attention. So I don't think kuna mwanaume akona mental issue haezi handle with this. Frank Kivindu says the society teaches men to kangumu. Sharing your challenges amounts to being branded a weak man, of which no man would want such a title. We hear you. Martin Dubia says, but do they really know what they are, or that they are having a mental problem in the first place? That's a very good question, and that's why self-awareness is important, and we're having this conversation. Louise Tobiko says, because if a man says he has a mental issue, people will think he's abnormal. Mutambu Dominic says the real question is, why does the society give a hear no evil, say no evil treatment to men's mental illness red signals? Mutambu, this is so important. And Tetu actually mentioned the same. King Julian says, because no one takes their time to listen to men. Everything has turned in favor of the girl child. We hear you. Tamaran Munene says, because of their pride, they don't want anyone to know about how traumatized they are. Eugene Keragori says, we just keep moving on as if nothing happened. We comfort ourselves. Mohammed Kadar says, I consider it confidential. Well, that's an interesting perspective, and we'll touch on it. Musa Mithika says, no one will care to listen. We are told to jikaze kama mwanaume, meaning we deal with our issues privately till the end. Nyangwono Omeri says, because no one will understand, period. Ogora Arnold says, because sometimes figuring out your feelings feels better than being a subject matter in somebody's moshene. We hear you, Arnold. Timothy Kibe says, because there is a mentality that says ladies first. Really? David KUS says a toxic masculinity. And I'm glad that's coming from a guy. And Bentham here, not even a lesser man, but much of a woman. Delete man in your question, obviously, and there's no debate. Bentham, I hear you loud and clear, and definitely these are the issues we are opening that can on so that we can talk about them and also give each other perspective on how we can handle them going further. And I'm speaking on behalf of the gentlemen that joined me this morning. Well, we'll be back with much more. Stay with us.
To achieve great things in life, you must do little things every day, like the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate.
1, wake up. 2, brush up. 3, smile through your day with a fresh breath and strong tea. Smile through your day with a fresh breath and strong tea.
Do the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate and give yourself a future to smile about.
new year comes with new year deals. Renew your corporate subscription and get a bonus. Subscribe to Nation e-paper for 3 months and get 1 week absolutely free. 6 months and get 2 weeks absolutely free. 1 year and get 3 weeks absolutely free. To sign up, visit epaper.nationmedia.com or email subscription@ke.nationmedia.com. Offer valid till 28th February 2021.
Japo njia bora zaidi ya kuhakikisha usafi wa mikono ni kutumia maji na sabuni, katika baadhi ya sehemu wameweka mchanganyiko huu maalum wa kutoa uchafu maarufu sanitizer, na tunahimizwa kila tunapotumia tuhakikishe kwamba sehemu zote za mkono zimeupata mchanganyiko huo kwa kufanya hivi kwa takriban sekunde 20 hivi, na tuhimizane wenyewe kwa wenyewe kufanya usafi, manake wapo mwenzako hatafanya usafi basi anakutia wewe hatarini.
You said that one day I was going to feel the way you felt about loving me without me feeling the same way about you. Well, now I understand you better.
We have to find a way to destroy the vid. Right now.
We have to do everything possible not to go back to them.
I'm not going to just stand to the side and do nothing while another man comes and takes Luciana away from me.
Sasa, mimi ni Zuri kutoka Safaricom na niko hapa kukuchanua. Kaa macho. Safaricom upiga kutoka 0722 000 000 pekee. Ukipigiwa na namba nyingine, usipeane maelezo yako ya kibinafsi. Tuma namba ya mkora kwa 333 ili Safaricom ichukue hatua.
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gashanja. Let's take a look at the other world. Now, Poland's youngest children returned to school for the first time in over 2 months. And Poland has seen some of the longest school closures in Europe due to COVID-19. Now, a ranking by the Insights for Education Foundation, a Switzerland-based non-governmental group, shows Polish schools have been closed for 128 days, putting it second in the EU after Romania with 140 days. The list is topped by Panama, Bolivia and El Salvador with 295, 270 and 267 days of closed schools. Now, the head of Insights for Education said access to remote learning and the quality of that learning have been very variable around the world. And the common assumption the school is dangerous has not held up. There are ways that countries have shown to safely and gradually return to school. Still in Poland, following a call of defiance from the Highlanders' veto movement, restaurants and hotels in Poland's Tatra Mountains reopened despite a partial lockdown. Police and health officials have conducted inspections, fining business owners. On Monday, Poland's government extended most of the antivirus restrictions through the end of the month, requiring ski slopes, gyms and hotels to remain closed to the general public and restaurants to only do takeaway service. Establishments have been closed in Poland except for takeaway services since October the 24th. Some, however, found ingenious ways to try and get around the rules, including a gym that branded itself a place of worship, an ice rink that said it was a flower shop, and a bar in Warsaw that is calling itself a beer academy.
Policja informuje. Mamy stan epidemii.
Now, heavy rain in Bolivia's Cochabamba region has triggered floods and mudslides as the Taquina River overflows. Search and rescue teams use pumps to extract water from homes and businesses in different areas along the river. One of the residents says it's an emergency for all of us bordering the Taquina River because the rain we are having is making it overflow in many places. Retaining walls are collapsing and we have already suffered 2 floods. Human lives have been lost, material, goods, houses, everything. We do not want to suffer that again. Well, NTV will be covering the proceedings in Washington, D.C. live with incisive analysis on what the change of guard in America means for Kenya in terms of investment and bilateral relations. Our coverage begins at 2 p.m. Wednesday, which is today, so you need to stay with us for that coverage. And of course, even as we take in the pictures and sounds from that inauguration ceremony, and as you can see, there's a lot of conversations and chatter around this anticipated ceremony. Let's listen in from CNN.
Because of what Donald Trump stoked, didn't invent it, but he certainly stoked it over these last 4 years. So I think there's a lot of fear among lots of groups of people about what we're going to continue to see from angry white Americans who feel like they are being displaced. You know, there is that quote that says, when you're a person who has privilege, equality looks like oppression. And that's the kind of language you hear from a lot of the folks we, have saw on the Capitol there. This idea of rights being taken away, sort of the language of slavery. That is how those folks feel. And how you reach those people, that is going to be a big test for Biden. And maybe he can't. He'll certainly try, and we'll see what he says, in a few hours when he takes the oath of office and gives his inaugural address.
We'll see what he says, and then more importantly, we'll see what he does. And the reason I brought it up with you is because you've spoken about it very eloquently and been vulnerable on this point, which I think is really helpful to the audience to understand. It's not just talking about other people, it's the people doing the job as well. So thank you. Now, on the pardon front, Mark, let me go to you first, and then I want to go to David about looking at Biden as a snapshot of where he stands and what he's looking at. But on the pardons, let's say he does pardon Steve Bannon. So what? What can Trump do that will hurt his reputation at this point, that will shock? Or am I looking at it the wrong way?
Well, I think those of us who have high morals, or at least think we have high morals, look at the Steve Bannon pardon if it happens and just shake our head. However, if you are a Republican right now and you're a Republican leader, perhaps somebody from more of the old school Republican Party, you're very concerned, because what you're seeing now is Steve Bannon and Donald Trump, who do nothing but go forth and have a political strategy that is scorched earth. And you look at Donald Trump right now, who's leaving office, bringing Bannon back into the fold, Chris, with him. Just imagine that. Just imagine what these two are going to wreak havoc on the Republican Party in the next couple of years. I think that Mitch McConnell, we saw that speech that he gave earlier today, calling out Donald Trump. I think Mitch McConnell saw this coming and is trying to make a break.
David Gergen, Joe Biden has never seen...
Well, analysis coming from CNN, and of course a lot of this will be happening throughout the day. Remember, right here on NTV, we'll start that live coverage from 2 p.m. even as we anticipate that inauguration ceremony of President-elect Joe Biden and his Vice President, that is Kamala Harris, that will be happening from noon U.S. time, but that would be 8 p.m. here in Kenya. Now back to our conversation of the day, and we're speaking to the men to understand how to ensure that they harness their mental wellness. And I'd like the gentlemen to talk about something that is important. We've talked about what the world has, instigated and gotten us to a point where we're dealing with mental illness. But then again, the question is, what do you do as a person? How do you safeguard yourself from first yourself and also from other people? Setting boundaries. Kim, how do you do that? Kim, we're talking about setting boundaries for self and to self. How do you do that for yourself? I think we lost Kim at some point. Well, let's hear from Charles Tuti. How do you do this for yourself? We seem to have lost the two gentlemen, but hey, let's hear from Tetu. How do you do this for yourself?
I think setting boundaries is definitely important, and I think everyone can admit that they spend a significant amount of time on social media, and that social media is one of the contributors to a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And so for me, the first thing that comes to mind is just like realize that it's not a must that you follow certain people, and it's not a must that they follow you. One of the things that that I've done, for example, on Twitter, is just muting and blocking. And nasikwa ubaya, it's just like, hey, listen, you know what? Where I'm at right now, I can't handle the kind of energy that you're projecting right now. So, boop, mute, block, and I think that you have to take a step where you prioritize self-care, and you realize that, listen, everyone is too busy to concern themselves about taking care of you. You have to take care of yourself. In personal relationships, you have to identify who is your inner circle and who isn't. You know, I guess, you know, we used to think that, you know, and sometimes it applies even to relatives. I'm telling you, hey, not every relative is your friend. This past season, I have drawn some very, very clear lines in the sand. And I've seen me and my family really benefit from that. So I would say the first thing is to not be embarrassed about setting boundaries, to understand that self-care is important and that you are probably best equipped to take care of yourself. And then, yeah, just draw your inner circle very tight.
Okay, but also even as we talk about drawing the lines, there's also the fact that you've got to be self-aware of the triggers that you also set yourself up for. You know, the traps within. How do you handle that?
Oh, my goodness. I can't even claim to say I understand all my triggers. I'm figuring out new ones every now and then. But as I figure them out, because of course, you know, Gladys, this is a journey. I think as I figure them out, it's about going to the root, what it is that creates that trigger, and then saying, okay, how can I protect myself and safeguard my emotions so that this thing doesn't trigger me again. Yeah.
Do we have Kim and Shaltuti back? Okay, we'll get to them in a moment. But Daktari, I think this is so crucial, whether male or female, but for men, now that we're focusing on them today, how exactly can you ensure you harness the same?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's two things I want to bring up. Number one, that the responsibility of our mental wellness lies mostly with ourselves. And I'll say about 70 is ours. And then the other 30% could have many other people and stakeholders in your life. But the one thing that I began talking about was about being able to look at yourself in the 5 dimensions I talked about. And then when you start finding yourself going off balance by them, and you know, the funny thing is that all of these things are tied to those things like relationships that I was talking about, you know, and other people. So what Tetu is saying is really true about being able to know who you can be able to be around and who you don't have to be around, even as you live your life. So the number one thing is to create a regimen for yourself which ensures balance in those 5 dimensions. Physically, is there something you need to stop eating, or you start eating, or activities you need to start doing, okay? And this applies to both men and women, by the way. Emotionally, are there things you need to stop ruminating about? And it's easy to say it than to do it, but that's really important. Are there people who trigger you? Like every time when you're with them, you realize, in fact, one of the ways I tell people to know who you need to avoid is assessing how you feel after you've been with someone or you've been around them. You know, you get out there, you're worried, you're still wondering, you're like, oh my goodness, there are people who are just very negative, you know, we are all going to die, COVID is here, nobody has anything, you know. So, and then behaviorally, to start guarding yourself, when you start finding yourself isolating, find safe ways to actually get out there and go to places where you wanted to go. But even as we do all these balancing things, Gladys, I think before our time is over, there's something I really have to mention. Do you know, Gladys, that the men you have today are not typical? I hope you know that on your panel today, these are not typical men, because men are not really amenable to the idea of, come, let's sit down and talk. That's women's space. That's women. You know, any woman, you call your girl and say, hey guys, let's go sit down on Friday evening and let's talk about our lives. And women will talk. But men, you say, come, let's talk. Oh yeah. They'll talk about Manchester, because someone talked about Arsenal and bigger things in the world, okay? Who to swear in 70 and all that. Yeah. Men do not respond to sitting down and come, let's talk. That's even why in relationships, many women are frustrated, telling, oh, my man doesn't want to talk about the status of a relationship. I keep telling him, let's sit down and let's talk. He will not listen to you, and neither will he sit down to talk with you. Men require activity. Tatu talked about mentorship, and he said about how a long time ago, men used to their knowledge and their counsel while doing activities with other men. So what we've discovered is, if you really want to give thoughts or talk with him, when you're in the car with him during the commute, that's probably a good time to start a topic, you know, and start like trying to go into it. But don't tell someone, come, let's sit down and talk, you're really going to miss the point. So for me, the idea is to say people who are around men have to start learning that men are also not the super gender, as well as one of the people who wrote him said.
Yeah.
We're as human comes. And many times when you find the aggression and the violence and stuff, it's really trying to protect the vulnerability that we have in those 3 dimensions I told you. I told you biologically earlier, I told you socialization and also outcomes. We're really trying to, we have this magic hormone called testosterone, which we're given when you're about 13 years old, which never existed before. So we have this very vulnerable person wrapped up in this powerful hormone, and we don't even know how to harness all of that stuff. So you're really talking about, we need to know a bit better, we need to understand other men as well, we need to really spend time with our men and people in our lives, in our parents, our men. I mean, for me, that has also been as a personal thing. And when I started speaking to the men in my life more as human beings, I started reaping a lot of benefits from it, and not looking at them as a function. This is your father, this is your boss, this is your, you do that. But really, you're really accentuating the problems we're talking about. So to guard yourself, definitely have those boundaries, like we've said. You don't have to do things that you don't want to do, and that's a thing that men don't seem to understand. We're pushed by society to achieve. I have to drive the biggest car in the village. I have to, those things are necessary, and they actually contribute to your mental unwellness. Sorry.
Okay, I have somebody who's saying, hey, leo ile mwakenya nimepata ya wanaume. Well, it sheds a lot of light in how men think, and this whole Mars versus Venus perception of men and women. And to the gentlemen, Kim and Shaltuti, there is asking the need to know that you need to learn to ask and accept help. Most people even said, we want to help, but they won't accept it. How are you handling this, and how is it vital for you? Kim? Shaltuti, can you hear me?
I think I go first. Yeah, go.
Okay, there we go, Kim. Oh, okay, fine. We really seem to be having an issue here. Let's sort that out. But Tetu, have you come to that realization that it is important that you ask for help, know when it's too much, and also accept it when it's offered?
It's a really, I'll be honest, Gladys, it's a thing that I'm still really trying to work on. For some reason, it is really hard for me to ask for help. And sometimes there's issues like, okay, ask for help from whom? And who's this person? And what are they going to do with the information that I tell them? Literally, sometimes that's how the male mind thinks. You're like, hey, okay, I'm going to open up with this person. So when they're having like 2, 3 cool, cold ones with their friends, am I going to become the topic of discussion? Then there's also the African culture of don't put your dirty laundry out there. These things are societal, man. But I think it's about taking small steps. Understanding that if you can ask for help from your friend, if you can ask for help from a parent, if you can ask for help from whatever, someone who's within your circle, it becomes a little bit easier to ask for help from someone who is professional, like a therapist or a counselor. So I firmly believe that in life it's always baby steps, and it's these building blocks. So if you can, I would encourage the men that if it's about, if asking for help is a struggle, start small, Don't say, hey, my entire life I've been struggling with this, can you help? Or maybe it's a small issue like, hey, I had an outburst the other day. Have you ever had an outburst like that before? What did you do to deal with that? And then maybe that can provoke larger conversations.
Okay, and still tied to the same, seeking help in the sense of going to see a therapist is something that most men shy away from for whatever reason. For you, what role has that played, or is it something that you've even explored?
Yeah, a big part of it is financial. Let's keep that in mind, that I think for a lot of men, they find it difficult to justify what that cost would be. And of course, there's other avenues. We have a pastor or a spiritual leader or all this kind of stuff. But that is a factor. I just don't know where to start. I remember when I posted on Twitter about the struggle with depression, people sent a lot of resources. But I was hesitant because I was like, still, man, how do I go and just start talking to to a stranger, you know, and which is why, Gladys, initially I was saying, I wish that we had systems within our family structures, because the truth of the matter is that we're Africans, and Africans are extremely communal. I wish we had structures within our families and extended families, so that from there, you know, then you can be able to seek professional help. But it's a challenge.
Okay, and Tetu speaks on behalf of very many men. And Daktari, I'm sure you know about this from the work you've done before. So what would be the advice to our fellow men, even as we bring this conversation to a close?
Guys, hang in there. Hang in there. Help is at the corner. We are at the door. The fact that this conversation has become a national one, and that has begun for a long time and has been continuing now, about how do we help men, I think that I can confidently tell men that, you know, someone's listening now. And I know that there have been the history of not being listened to or being thrown to the curb. But I think it's time as men we take over that, and we start having our own forums. And we've had a few of those forums before, where we have men alone in the room. We talk with each other, and we share our experiences, and even anonymously, where you know someone shares their difficulties and normalizes the experience of being a man. When it comes to seeking professional help, I want to encourage men that, just alongside what Tetu said, there's two avenues where I think you can actually begin the journey to get help. Number one is within your family structure. If you have a family member who you trust, you can talk with them about your difficulties, and then they can probably help you to go to the next level, which is to seek professional help. The other one is a buddy system. The challenge that I've been throwing out to men, and probably this is a good topic, Gladys, at the beginning of the year, where I can challenge men to really make it your challenge this year to have one true friend. Why do I say that? Many men have squads, and they have friends and have buddies who are drinking buddies, they watch football together, take road trips together, but many times they don't even share really what's going on with them. And when they do, they're told, here, have this cold beer, drink it. That's going to drown your problems. But my challenge to men is have that one person who I can call an accountability buddy for you, and especially when it comes to your life and your mental health. And you'll be surprised at what that does. When somebody starts saying, you know, I don't know if the way you've been out, you know, I mean, I know we have we have curfew now. People who disappear from home for like 3 days, then come back, and then we normalize it on Monday and laugh with memes. If you have someone who actually tells you, hey, what's up? What's going on? And you can talk with them honestly about what's going on in your life. I think for me, that's really beneficial as a man. And so for men, I like what Tetu said, start small. There's no point of starting all the way, you know, going to the biggest hospital ever. But just start with your family members, your friends. And then when you require professional help, because many times you will require it, then escalate it to go see a therapist who's going to help you out. And if you require medication for any reason, you might get that under supervision of a doctor. But in the interim, I'm just asking men, hang in there. This is not an easy journey. First of all, the fact that you're listening to this, you're already a miracle. That's why chromosome didn't make it easily. And so really, that's why you find, you know, child mortality under 5, majority is boys, not girls. And so you find that, you know, for me, when we're able to talk with men, it's a huge privilege and an honor. So thank you, Gladys, for this platform to be able to do that.
Excellent. And Tetu, before we say goodbye, definitely this is a journey you have been walking, and you've even lent your time and resources and talent to the same. That's why we had played a snippet of a song that you put together. What was the inspiration behind it?
The inspiration behind that song, 2020 was a very hard year for a lot of different people. And I realized that the thing that was really suffering most was hope. There's an interesting article I read that what do you do when hope is taken away? Because what the pandemic has done is people are so used to saying next year will be better, next month will be better. But then sometimes COVID says, no, actually. But then I realized that, you know what, hope was important. And I just wanted to instill some sense of hope in people. It was also a song, you know, about some, you know, my wife and I were having some challenges in our marriage. So it was also a song where we were saying, look, hold on to your faith, let's not let go of this thing. And so I really hope it touches brothers out there and allows them to, you know, cry along to the song or listen to it and just enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay, and hold on to Your Faith is a Song we'll actually end the show with in just a moment, Tetu. Thank you for your time. But even as we say goodbye, finally, my other guys are back. Shaltuti, Shaban, let me hear from you. What would be, from your experience, what would be your advice to fellow men as you walk this journey of life, keeping in mind that your mental wellness is so critical?
I think Dr. and Tetu have touched on this, but the aspect about help, unfortunately, the society teaches men not to ask for help. But then again, one thing I've learned through my journey is that asking for help doesn't make you a burden, and neither does it make you weak. It just makes or shows that you are human. It's human to ask for help because we don't always have everything figured out. And so ask for help and the system. It's been working very well for me. If you can have an accountability partner, someone who calls you out for in good times and in bad, it really goes a long way in solidifying your journey towards trying to be better or trying to resolve some of these issues that you've been having for quite a period of time.
All right, well said. For you, Kim?
For me, very similar. I think all the amazing men on this panel have said it. But I think the number one thing is to start with learning to just accept of where you are and know that you have an issue. Accept that, you know what, I can't control it. I need help. Whether that help is like, as the men said, in the body therapy, a mentor, whatever it is, you need to just accept that first, that we need help. I think let's not lie to ourselves. Let's not let the world lie to us. Let's set our own expectations. Let's set our own boundaries with ourselves first, and then it's very much easier to then now go and be able to be like, okay, this is how I can make this better. This is how I can help. This is how my friend I know can help me. This is how my mentor can help me. This is how my therapist can help me. But start with not lying to yourself. Don't lie to yourself that you're okay. Tell yourself that you're not. And once you do that, you see how all those emotions flood out and open up, and you'll be ready to start your new journey.
Very well said. Kim Thirumungai, who is a creative and mental health advocate, Tetu Shanin, studio music artist, and also a mental health advocate in his own right. Dr. Oscar Gidua, who is a forensic psychologist and also a member of the mental health task force put together by the government last year to look at the mental wellness of the country. And Shaltuti Shaban, an admin and brand builder who also has lived experience with mental illness. Gentlemen, thank you for being part of this conversation and being so vulnerable, because this is the one thing that most men cannot do or will not do, but we hope that the insights shared today will give hope and, of course, a lifeline to many out there. Now, tomorrow, we'll be back here 7 a.m. as usual, and we'll be focusing on fitness. Now, this time around, it will be a little bit different. And this one will be giving a lifeline, so to speak, for those who have chronic illnesses and also have had injuries, whether sports, car accidents, or even surgeries that rendered them perhaps incapable of walking again, or just with some sort of disability. Now, this category of people have over time thought it is not possible to keep fitness, exercises and all that. But the truth is, this is very possible. We'll have a fitness trainer and we'll also walk with a nutritionist to understand how you can couple these two to ensure that you keep your fitness life in check. But as I bid you farewell, NTV again will be covering the proceedings in Washington, D.C. live with incisive analysis on what the change of guard in America means for Kenya in terms of investment and bilateral relations. Now, our coverage begins at 2 p.m. this afternoon, so make sure you stay with NTV. And as I promised, I leave you with this song by Tetu Shani, Hold On to Your Faith. Have a good day.
Presenting the new Harpic bathroom cleaner. Compared to ordinary detergents, its thick formulation gives you superior cleaning and kills 99.9% of germs and viruses all around the bathroom. Blue
for the toilet
and red
for the bathroom. Maji mdosi wangu ametupa simu yangu ndani ya maji.
Mdosi wako kwa sawa. Venye Nkirota ameniambia ajui na akimpigia simu ashiki. Hey, guy, what the?
For the women who deserve more, Moped is now in Kenya and more than 40 countries. With its nylon-free surface, new Moped has unique softness and up to 100% protection. Your skin will love it.
Along came love. You said that one day I was going to feel the way you felt about loving me without me feeling the same way about you. Well, now I understand you better.
We have to find a way to destroy the vid. Right now.
We have to do everything possible not to go back to them.
I'm not going to just stand